Hello everyone, welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. I'm your host Mark Philpott, and normally on this show I speak to people all across the world about their amazing travel experiences. But today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. Hello, welcome. I hope you're all doing very well out there in podcast listening land. It's great to have you here, and if you're a regular listener to my show, I want to thank you very much for your loyalty. I very much appreciate it. And if you're a first timer here, then thank you for finding us. It's great that you're here. And today's going to be a little bit of a mix up for you, but don't forget there's all those other episodes that have been done before, and you can check all those out on the website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. If you have been a guest on my show and you're listening in today, I want to thank you very much for taking the time out of your schedule to come along and listen to my episode, because today, after 125 appearances as a host, I'm actually going to be a host and a guest in the same show. And there's many reasons why I wanted to do this today, so why don't we start off talking about some of those. But first of all, I just wanted to wish everybody a very happy day, no matter where you are in the world listening to me today. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's affecting a lot of people in lots of different ways. And I just wanted to send out my love from my sailboat here in Australia to everybody that's listening, because we're all in it together, as they say. And one of the many reasons I wanted to do this particular show today was to, I guess, show some solidarity towards all of our causes, and that is that we're all individuals. We all deal with things in a different way, but we are so connected in so many other ways as well. So I want to demonstrate that through, I guess, sharing my story today. And it's important for me to start off by saying I'm in no way preaching anything to you today in this show. This is merely opening up my soul and sharing it with the world, or anybody who wants to listen, as a matter of fact, because like all of my guests that have come on my show, we all have a story to tell. And as I've learnt by interviewing all those people that have been on my show, there's so much more to us than talking about our travel stories. Most of my guests talk about their resilience, their passion in life, their goals, their families, how they've moved around the world, the obstacles they've overcome to create and achieve the challenges that they've set themselves. There's a number of different dimensions that have come out of this podcast experience for me that I'm so grateful for. And I thought it was time to maybe share my own journey, because as a matter of fact, probably nearly everybody that I have had on the show as a guest, they don't know much about me at all. And I was very inspired by one of my guests recently who asked me to actually do this podcast episode about myself, because she didn't know anything about me and she wanted to understand who the guy was on the other side of the microphone. So I really appreciate that offer from her, and I wanted to then take this opportunity to create this sharing about my life story. And I think it's quite an opportune time to have this conversation, and for me it is a conversation. It's not me sitting here talking to you, it's me sitting alongside you, as if I was in your living room or wherever you're listening to this podcast today, and having a conversation, because maybe what I'm about to share will open up many questions in your own mind and your own life. Who knows? The idea that I have of sharing my story is maybe to resonate with some people and what they might be thinking about in this troubled time that we are all trying to endure in our own different ways. And I just thought that, given that people have probably got more time now to reflect on their life journey than they've ever had before, most of us are in lockdown somewhere in the world, and we've got more hours in the day than we probably know what to do with. And I wanted to use that opportunity to share with you some of the challenges that I've been through in my life, what I've learned from those challenges, and more importantly, how I came out the other side. So before we get there, I just want to play a little bit of music and then I'll be right back. We're going to start my journey today with at a time where I was living in Brussels in Belgium. And for those of you who don't know the story, I was in a very satisfying career for many, many years with an amazing company called DHL, the big logistics and supply chain management organization. And I was fortunate enough to live and work all over the world with DHL. And their world headquarters at the time of me going to Brussels was in Brussels. And to work in a world headquarter environment for many years was a very thrilling and a very steep learning curve for a young Kiwi guy who was thrust into the big multinational business. But when I was in Brussels working for DHL, I went through a number of different epiphanies in my life. And some of those lessons that I went through in those times was very applicable to what many people might be thinking about of their lives today. And as I said before, having this opportunity that we've all been given to reflect upon our life journey and thinking about where we want to go next, there's probably no better time in the history of your career that you've had this opportunity to actually sit still for 5 minutes and to think about where you wanted to go. My corporate life was very intense. It was all about getting results for the company. It was about traveling around the world, which was obviously a great perk of the job. And I got to go to many, many countries and see many, many things and develop many, many amazing friendships that last to this very day. But there's a price to pay for all of that, and anybody who's been in the corporate jungle, as I call it, for many years and who has lived that type of lifestyle will understand that there's a trade-off. And I woke up many times during that period and asked myself, is this something that I want to do for the rest of my life? And as a single guy at the time and traveling around the world and seeing all these countries and going to many amazing things and obviously earning good money to go along with that, I was very much caught up in that whole dilemma of living a life of excess. And it didn't matter whether I was flying off to watch a Formula One Grand Prix one weekend or going to a party on a very remote island somewhere around the world. All those options were available to me, and it was a lifestyle that one could become very used to, but it was also a lifestyle in the end that meant very little to me in terms of what I was creating for myself. And I had a wonderful career at DHL. It taught me many, many lessons and gave me the skills that I have today, and there's absolutely no regret from that point of view. But there was a very dark side to it for me, and many people that are listening today who know me from that period may not know some of the pain and agony that I was actually going through. And there was one particular Sunday afternoon when I was sitting in my apartment alone in Brussels where I was very unhappy, and I was even contemplating ending my life. And for anybody out there that's been into that dark hole, you will understand that it's a very personal thing, it's a very lonely thing, and it's also a very scary thing. And even sitting here and talking about it today and opening up about this is quite an emotional thing to do. It's not something that I find easy. It was a time in my life where I had a lot of responsibility, a lot of accountability. A lot of people who weren't close to me didn't know what was going on. And it was an opportunity for me to look at my life in a whole completely different way. And I was very fortunate on that particular day because there was something happening on my TV screen that was in front of me that ended up changing my life completely. And extraordinarily enough, it was through somebody else and having compassion to help somebody else that actually helped turn my life around. And many people might know the story, but it led me on a pathway towards being more compassionate in my life, being less selfish. And because I hadn't had a family of my own and I hadn't had that responsibility, it was something that was a bit of a wake-up call. So I started my first, I guess you could say, charitable or philanthropic activities in those days. And I started helping a small organization in Belgium And through that, I met a lot of people around the world that wanted to help me with that particular cause. And this gave me great hope for myself. It actually opened a door into a new world for myself. And I think when we least expect it in life, we get these opportunities, and sometimes we create them, but most of the time the universe is creating them for us. And it's very relevant to the situation that we find ourselves in today, because 3 months ago nobody in the world would have anticipated that we would be in the situation that we're in right now. And that is a situation where many of us are sitting around at home thinking about our lives probably in a more intense way than we ever have, whether we're alone in that journey or whether we've got a family. There's a lot of reflection and retrospection going on, and I think that's a good thing. So the universe has given us all a fantastic opportunity right now to hit the reset button, to look at our lives in true honesty. And I guess going back to that time when I was living in Brussels, the first thing that this situation that I was confronted with, it allowed me to look at my true self for the first time in my life, really. It was when I was in a darkest, deepest depression, and I asked myself, how did I really feel? What made me get to this stage? It wasn't DHL's fault. It wasn't any of my colleagues' fault. It was a situation that I had dug my own self into. And a number of answers came up for me. The first one was I wasn't really doing what I was extremely passionate about in life. And that might be fundamentally hard for some people to understand. Like, who would not want to travel the world every day, stay in beautiful hotels and see all the amazing cities around the world, and have the availability on offer there to, also be involved in some incredible business opportunities. I was dealing with people in very senior positions all over the world in amazing organizations, and on the surface that all looked like it was a fantastic opportunity. The reality was, inside my soul there was something that wasn't happy. And I wonder how many people are sitting out there today with that same feeling in their soul, that now that they've stepped back from their work from a little bit, if you're not going into the office every day, if you haven't got that busy mode pressed on, what are you actually thinking about? How are you actually thinking about your life? And at that time I had the opportunity to sit back and actually think about, okay, what's happening here? And I was presented with this opportunity of doing something different, being involved in a charity organization, being compassionate to other people. And I started to realize that in my soul that was something that I'd really missed in my life. So I took that opportunity with open arms and I ran with it. And a couple of things happened. The first thing that happened was I got outside my comfort zone. And I think a lot of people listening today will be outside of their comfort zone in their lives in many ways. When you get told your job's no longer there, when you get told that your paycheck's no longer there, when you get told you don't know when you're going back to work or if you're going back to work again, that's an extraordinarily difficult thing for a lot of people to deal with, and I can understand that. So sometimes these things are completely taken out of our control, and I felt like that when I started to work in this whole compassionate area. It was an area that I wasn't familiar with. I didn't know how it worked. I was around people that I didn't normally circulate with, but it started to be a very important grounding for me, and it started to bring me to the center of who I truly was. Yet I didn't recognize at that stage that I had many years to go forward until I really got to where I am today. So after doing that, I was transferred by DHL. I had the opportunity to go to Singapore, so I moved from Brussels to Singapore. And when I arrived in Singapore, having left behind my charitable out of work options, I decided to create my own option in Singapore. So I started my own charity organization, international charity organization. And I did that while I was still working for DHL, and I became very passionate about that, and DHL was fantastic. They gave me a lot of opportunities to develop that opportunity. And I started to see the real me evolving from that opportunity. I started to see that this was something that I wanted to do moving forward in my life. And I think we're all possibly at a stage now where we can ask ourselves the questions during this lockdown situation. Am I doing what I really want to do? And it doesn't matter whether you're a CEO of a major organization, or whether you're a doctor or a lawyer, it doesn't matter if you're a bus driver. Is it what you really truly have in your mind that you want to do every day that you're doing right now? Because my conversation today with you is about my journey to freedom. And I've gone from a lifestyle of having wardrobes full of Armani suits and Italian leather shoes to being able to fly around the world every day to all sorts of different events, to a life today where I live on a sailboat and I work doing my podcast show from a sailboat. And some people will go, well, that was a huge fall from grace, and I actually look at it as the opposite, and I'm going to explain why. So when I got to Singapore, I started my own international charity organization. I got lots and lots of volunteers coming on board, helping with projects all over the world, and we did some pretty amazing stuff together. And it was through that journey that I started to recognize the power of giving back and the power of making a difference. And what I decided to do in the early days of that organization was to, I guess, walk the talk with my own financial capacity. I was earning good money at DHL. I started to use my financial capacity to invest in my own charity organization. And that happened for a number of years before I actually reached out and started getting donors and sponsors on board. And as that journey started to evolve, I started to understand more about myself as a human being and what was important to me. A couple of things that I learned was all the travel that I had done around the world had become a vitally important part of who I was. I understood cultures in different countries. I understood people's lifestyles. I'd been in the home and living rooms of people all over the world in all sorts of different countries, and I understood for the first time how much of a rich experience that was. And that was something that a paycheck could never give me, those experiences. It was fortunate that I was working for a company that enabled that to happen. But those conversations that I had and those interactions and those friendships that have evolved from those opportunities that I've had have been absolutely priceless in my life. And having the freedom to be able to go and do those sorts of things, I thought, right, this is something that I want to be able to do as my life evolves. Travel has become and will always be a very, very important part of my life. And I've had so many of my guests on my show talking about the benefits of travel, understanding different cultures. All the common themes are there. But the greatest thing for me for traveling anywhere in the world is about your own self-development and your own personal growth that comes from that. Because no matter where you are in the world and no matter what you do when you're traveling, there's something that you learn about yourself from that experience if you're honest with yourself. And that's the key to the conversation today, is being authentically honest with yourself. The other thing that changed for me was understanding ego. And when you're working in the corporate world and you're out there doing business deals all the time, you have to put on this confident front of power and control and knowing what you're doing, and you're up against some pretty tough people in terms of doing business. And unfortunately, that's part of the parcel if you want to operate in that world. I wasn't good at that, and I didn't enjoy doing it. So when I started to transition my life, I understood that I had to let go of my ego. And there was no question about it that when I was in that environment, I was like everybody else, and I played the game and I let my ego control who I was and what I was doing. But I became conscious of that fact, and I sat down and I reflected upon that, and I said to myself, right, we need to swap this ego over and reduce its intensity on what you're trying to do. So when I started my charity organization in Singapore and working in different countries around the world from that base, it was never about me. It was always about the beneficiaries that we were trying to help and the things that we were doing. And it was also about the volunteers that were getting involved, because many of them were going through life-changing situations as well. Then I came to the stage where I thought, right, I want to do this for the rest of my life. So I decided to work my way out of DHL, put together an exit strategy with a very fine manager that I had at the time. And together we managed to get me out of the company and being able to move on to my next life journey. And that was basically working full-time on my own international charity organization. Now, what transpired was very interesting, because here I was outside of the corporate world for the very first time in a very, very complex situation in Singapore, because Singapore is an amazing place. It's an amazing place to live. It's an amazing place to work. It is a bubble. And I've always called Singapore the Monaco of Asia. And unless you're earning very good money, then Singapore is a very difficult place to be, particularly if you're trying to start a new business. So it wasn't too long before I recognized that I had to swim pretty fast if I was going to make it in this little island town, or I was going to have to get out of there. So I worked very hard, night and day, on my charity organization, to the extent where I sat down one day and I said, hang on, is this really helping me? What am I doing to change the world when I'm actually driving myself back into the ground? And one of the things that I reflected on during that journey was that here I was trying to do good in the world by helping people, financially investing my own money, getting volunteers on board, flying around and creating and doing and making sustainable projects everywhere. But I was back in the corporate mode again. I was using my corporate skills and influence to work as hard as I possibly could to make this happen. So I wasn't actually helping myself. And of course, burnout came along, and I got to a stage where I started to have some medical problems, and the universe started to give me signals that it was time for change. So what could I do? I'd been working in the corporate world. I'd started a not-for-profit organization. I thought I was on the right journey. But no, there was another couple of chapters that I had to do. So what I did next was quite radical. In fact, it was very radical. And I sat down one night. I remember the night very, very clearly. I sat down in my apartment in Singapore, and I thought to myself, right, if I really want to understand who I am as a human being, I've got to strip away everything. I've got to strip away the materialistic behaviors that I have in my life. I've got to step out of that. I've got to put myself into a vulnerable situation, because then I'm going to find out how I deal with all those things. Until now, I'd had everything laid out for me on a plate. I'd had a corporate credit card that I could run behind. I was living in Singapore, which was a fantastic place to do business and be innovative and creative. But I still wasn't being true to myself. I still didn't know who I really was as a person, and more importantly, who I wanted to be as a person. My identity had always been linked to what I did. I was the DHL guy, or I was the charity guy, or the not-for-profit guy, or as I called my organization, humanity. I was the humanity guy. But I wasn't. I was Mark Philpott, and I am Mark Philpott. But how many people actually knew who the real Mark Philpott was? Not many, less than a handful. So as you're sitting there today and you're asking yourself maybe the same question, when you go to work every day, how many people really know who you are? How many people deserve to know who you are? How many people go to work and put a mask on and don't show their true self? And more importantly, who's not true to themselves? So these are all things that I asked myself on that journey. So when I got to my decision-making time about stripping my life back and coming up with a solution to really find out who I was, my radical response to that was to become a homeless man. Now, before I go any further, it's important that I recognize and define what I call as a homeless person. So if you look at the Oxford Dictionary, the definition of a homeless person is a person who has no fixed abode. So I decided that I needed to move out of my place, and I needed to put myself in a place of vulnerability. And for me, I wasn't going to be able to do that in Singapore. So one night I sat down at my computer and I sent out an email to my friends around the world and said, I'm going to become a homeless man as of tomorrow morning. I'm going to leave my apartment and I'm going to put myself out in the world. And I need love, shelter, water, and food. That's all I asked for. And I thought I would conduct this social experiment and see what happened to my life. And more importantly, what happened to me. Was it scary? Yes, it was incredibly scary. Was it exciting? Yes, it was very exciting. I remember writing the email and deciding probably for about 25 minutes if I was going to press the send button to send it out, but I did. And surprisingly enough, in the first hour or so after sending it out, I got replies from people from across the world saying, hey, come and stay with us. And we got a granny flat, you can stay out the back for a while, or do this and do that. So before too long, I had a number of people approach me to say that you can come and have part of your journey with us. And I thought that was tremendous. I started to see how generous humanity was even before I left Singapore. So that night I packed up a backpack with some clothes in it. I had a laptop bag with my laptop and a charger and a couple other things. And I decided the next morning that I was going to walk out of my apartment in Singapore and just leave it. And it just so happened that I'd been advertising the place, and a gentleman came along who was working in the oil industry. He was from the UK. And he came in and he said, "Oh, is this place furnished?" And I said, "Yes, you can have everything that's here, right down to the knives and forks and the Bose stereo system, the LCD TV, everything is yours. You can have it tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I'm going to walk out of here with my backpack and my laptop bag." And that's exactly what I did. So the next morning I got into a taxi, I went to Changi Airport, and I boarded a flight for Dubai. And I went to Dubai because one of the people that responded to my email was a friend of mine from DHL who I hadn't seen for 15 years, who contacted me and offered me very generously the opportunity to go and stay with his family in Dubai to start my journey. So I remember boarding the plane in Singapore, and my backpack was checked into the luggage and my laptop bag was sitting next to me on the plane, and I was thinking to myself, what have I done? How is life going to unfold for me? I was putting myself so far out of my comfort zone that I had no idea what was going to happen. And that's where all the learning started to happen, because that fear that I thought I had wasn't a fear at all. It was me just subconsciously trying to tell myself that all these things could possibly go wrong. And I remember going further into the flight and thinking, this is going to be okay, everything's going to work out, I just know it is. And I started to turn the negativity that was in my head into positive speak. Now relate that to what's going on around the world today, and you will know sitting there today, those people that either are connected to you via social media or in friendships, and the way they're dealing with this virus situation, and whether they're full of negative talk or whether they're trying to be inspirational and motivational at this time, you'll know who those people are in your life. And those are the people, the positive people that are in your life, are the ones that you want to run up to and give a hug right now to, because those are the people that deserve you, and those are the people that you need to be around. So when I was flying to Dubai, I went through my email responses and I looked at all the people that have sent me a response to say, come and stay with us, or you're welcome here. And I thought, okay, these are the positive people in my life. This is my inner circle. This needs to be my new inner circle in my life. And I wrote an email to every one of those people, and I pressed the button before I got off in Dubai. And I sent an email back saying, thank you very much, and I'll be in touch and I'll come and stay and whatever. But I made a decision right there and then on that flight that I needed to embrace positive people in my life. I needed to embrace people that supported me no matter what. It doesn't matter whether I was doing a homeless man journey, or I was changing jobs, or I was going to go and live in a different country. These were the people that put their hands up. And as I said before, this first gentleman that I went to stay with, I hadn't been in touch with him for, if I had, it had been once or twice, but in 15 years. And he was gracious enough to offer me the opportunity to go and stay with him and his family. So quite often in life what happens is, when you least expect it, the people that stand up there to support you are the ones that you didn't really think were going to, or you didn't even know were going to. So another great lesson for the period we're in now, those people that are connecting with you, those people that are going out of their way to stay connected to you during this virus time, are the people that are going to mean a lot in your life, and you should embrace those. So I arrived at Dubai at 4 a.m. in the morning. I remember coming out of the airport with my backpack and my laptop bag, and I sat on the seat outside the exit or the departure terminal. And I just sat there, and I remember it being a cool morning. It was a beautiful deserty type morning, and I just looked up at the sky, and the stars were still in the sky, and I said to myself, this is the beginning of the rest of your life. And it was the first time that I really said that to myself, and it was like something out of a book, or a transformation that was going on. But it was so surreal, because it felt like I'd stripped away so many layers just by getting rid of the stuff that I had. And that would become more obvious as my journey continued. I got into a taxi, and about 45 minutes later I arrived at my friend's place. He came running out, welcomed me into his home, and it was just a phenomenal start to the next chapter of my life, where I connected with this family who I hadn't known really much about at all. I ended up doing school runs and washing the car and going for bicycle rides and out in the desert, and all these incredible things started happening in my life because I opened my heart to that opportunity. And right now, the things that we're going through all together around the world, there's going to be so many opportunities that you can open your heart to, and there's going to be so many doors that can be opened for you if you allow yourself that opportunity. I could have sat in Singapore, I could have continued doing my not-for-profit work, could have burnt myself into the ground and thought that I was living a good life. The reality was I was on an escalator to nowhere. That's where I was going. Or probably to a hospital, to be honest. So after Dubai, I continued. I had people writing to me from all over the world. And I started this incredible journey. And it was really incredible. And I thought, okay, this is probably going to last maximum 12 months, where I'm going to travel around the world. I'm going to fly to all these different countries where people have offered for me to go and stay at their place or even travel with them. I did train trips with people. I did bus trips with people. Even went to a private island that a friend offered me in Sweden for a month. Extraordinary acts of generosity came out of this, and I started to see humanity from a completely different perspective. People were helping me to heal, and I think with what we're all going through at the moment across the world, healing is something we all need to understand better and embrace more, because at some level we all need to heal. We need to be forgiving people, we need to be forgiving ourselves at this time. And if there's any better time in history to reset ourselves in this world, it's right now. It's giving us the opportunity, the planet is giving us this opportunity to reset ourselves. So forget about climate change for a minute, forget about COVID-19 for a minute, think about yourself and think about how you can reset yourself to come out 10 times better out of this experience that we're all going through. And as I continued my journey as a homeless man around the world, every place I went to, it was like I was peeling back another layer towards my true, authentic self. And the incredible things that happened to me were these. I started to get more and more physically fit. I started to feel lighter and less stressed in every aspect of my life. I started to have this disassociation with money being the key driver of my life, and my valuation for money became much more intense in terms of I understood the value of money. When I lived in Brussels, I used to go to supermarket shopping and not even know how much money I was spending. I was just pouring things into the trolley. I had this oblivious relationship with money because it was so abundant in my life that I didn't value it. And that was something that I wasn't proud of. So as I was going through this homeless man journey, I started to appreciate things even more. I appreciated nature more. I was getting up in the morning when I wanted to get up in the morning. I had freedom in my life like I never experienced before. And I started to realize that my journey to freedom was about doing exactly what I was conditioned not to do. So I was always told by my family and my grandparents to work hard and to achieve your goals and to keep climbing the corporate ladder if you had the opportunity. And yeah, all those things can be good, right? But at the end of the day, you know, when we're all getting put in the ground at the end of the life, what is it that we want to have achieved in our lives? And for me, it wasn't about making shareholders richer or to make my boss look good in my corporate job. No, that's not what I was put on this earth to do. So as I started to strip back the layers during my homeless man journey, I started to realize the things that were really important to me, and freedom became the number one thing. Having the ability to do something every day that you wanted to do when you wanted to do it. So as that journey transpired, I started to realize that for my next step in my life, I wanted to create a life around freedom. I wanted to be in a financial situation where I didn't need to earn millions of dollars to be financially free. I needed to continue, for me, the path towards a minimalistic lifestyle, because after I got rid of everything, there was no more fancy motorcycles to maintain. There was no more fancy gadgets in my apartment that I had to maintain. what I really needed was a couple of pairs of shorts and some t-shirts and a jacket when I got cold. And I started to appreciate living with less was, as they always say, less is more. And I started to realize that for the first time in my life. So I continued on my homeless man journey, and 12 months soon turned into 18 months. And it was incredible. I was going crisscrossing the Atlantic Ocean. I was going all over Europe and Asia. I was ending up house sitting for different people in different countries around the world. It was an extraordinary experience. A lot of these people were complete strangers, people that I'd either met on the street. I had nights when I slept at bus stations. I slept in parks. I actually slept on a mountaintop one night, and that was an extraordinary experience, being so close to the stars. And whilst it wasn't like a typical homeless person, I was invited into people's homes as a complete stranger. I was taken off the streets at times and given food. And I started to appreciate the generosity of humanity at a completely different level. And I appreciate as much today the things as such as having guests on my show who want to share their stories with me and with my audience at the same level of gratitude. And I think it was during this time of being a homeless person that I really started to understand what gratitude is all about. And I think that's really paramount for where we all are today during this virus lockdown, because our gratitude should be to those people around us who love us, the people that also provide for us. And it was very sad to hear today when I read the news that the impact of domestic violence in Australia as a result of the coronavirus has been a 40% increase in domestic violence. And that's a very, very sad figure to hear, because this is a time where we all need to be pulling together and loving each other and not being abusive and disrespectful to each other. And it's when you're in times of hardship that you need to be pulling together. So for everybody listening today, remember that we should all be working together, pulling together, loving each other, but also accepting and respecting our differences where they do exist. And that goes for people that are spending a lot of time on social media talking about negative things related to this whole experience that we're going through. Is it really serving you any well doing that? Yes, you might be letting off some steam, but at the end of the day, is that bringing positive energy into your life? I'll let you decide that. So my continuation of my journey came to a very abrupt end when I was given a phone call, and the phone call came from Australia, and I was informed that my parents were both very ill at the same time and that I should get back to Australia. So I headed back to Australia. And that's where the next chapter of my life commenced. It was a very difficult period. I came back to Australia as a carer for my parents. It turned into a 24/7 scenario. And once again, I found myself outside of my comfort zone. I had never been in a situation where I was caring for elderly people before. I was staying in their place. It was a place that I hadn't felt very welcome all my life. And it was a very, very difficult challenge. And during that time, I had a lot of time for reflection again. I had a lot of time for reflecting on why my family situation was that way and how it had been that way for many, many years. And it gave me the opportunity to think about that relationship with my parents. 2 years later, my father passed away. I was at his bedside for his last 25 days. And that was one of the most beautiful experiences that I ever had, because I got to spend 25 days with my father alone in a hospital, building a bridge towards our relationship that we never had as a father and son. So if you're listening to this episode today and you're a son or you're a father, just take in mind that it's never too late to build that bridge. It might be extremely difficult, as it was in the case between myself and my father, but it was one of the best things, if not the best thing, that I've ever done in my life. And it didn't have a corporate tag attached to it. It didn't have a not-for-profit tag attached to it. It had a very humanistic tag associated with it. So while I was back in Australia, I started to think about the things that I wanted to do with my life. And one of the things that I'd always wanted to do was to live on a boat. So I decided to look around, and I eventually found a sailboat that I wanted to buy. And I bought the sailboat. And this has been a continuation of the journey to live a more minimalistic life. I haven't had a car for 20 years in my life. I got rid of my motorbike when I left Singapore, and I got another one when I was in Australia for a while. But for the rest of it, I decided that my minimalistic lifestyle was serving me very well. I understood the impact that I was having on the environment as a human being, and I didn't have to be a 25-year-old to understand that I was having a bad impact on the climate. So I decided to start living a more intentional life, and I thought that by living on a sailboat I was able to do that, and that has been the case. So I'm now over 2 years into the life and journey of living on a sailboat. How's that worked out? Well, it's absolutely fantastic. There's not many places in the world where you can have all of your worldly possessions in one place, and you can take that place to anywhere in the world that you want to go for free. And with the power of the wind and the sun, I can literally go anywhere in the world in my boat if I wish to. But this has been a chapter of learning and self-discovery, and that's why I started the podcast show about 10 months ago. Because in thinking about what I wanted to do next, I wanted to do something that was authentically connected to my soul. And I mentioned earlier in the show today that I thought it was very important that ultimately we end up doing what it is in life that we really want to do, that we're passionate about. And it was suggested to me that I should do the podcast show because the person said to me, well, you're really good at public speaking and you're good at talking with people and stuff, so why don't you do the podcast? So I decided to do it, and I thought I'd do it on a passionate subject that I love, which is the subject of travel. And I thought this was going to be a unique way of being able to talk to people about what they're passionate about without the subject matter being myself. So for the last 125 episodes of my show, been talking to people all over the world about their incredible travel experiences. And what I've learned from those people is that when you put yourself outside of your comfort zone, you can change your life. But what's important from that is that you don't have to travel around the world to do that. You can do that in your own backyard. You can do it in your own city. You can do it in your own neighborhood. And the opportunity exists for us now in this current climate more than it ever has, because we've got time on our hands. We've got time like we've never had time before. And I see so many people battling with that concept. What am I going to do? I'm getting so bored. I'm having to binge sessions on Netflix and all these sorts of things. Well, there are other opportunities out there right now to change your life. If you sit down and you actually assess all the different aspects of your life, your job, your relationships, your belief systems, your physical presence in this world, your spiritual presence in this world, there's an opportunity right now to have a deep assessment of all those things and to see whether or not you're prepared to put yourself out of your comfort zone to improve a better life for yourself. And I call that the journey to freedom, because what I have today is I have a life that's completely unaffected by the coronavirus. I have a life where I don't rely on the system. I get up every day when I want to. I do my podcast show and talking to people around the world. In fact, one of the benefits of being a podcaster right now is that our focus, our presence, our entertainment level has been recognized by many listeners around the world. And the numbers on my podcast show, and I know it's the same for many other podcasters because I talk to them, have gone through the roof at the moment. So here we are in a time of seemingly despair for a lot of people, where there's a lot of dark clouds, but yet there's so many people out there taking opportunities from this particular time, and there's no reason why you can't be one of those people. It's about the perspective that you have on the world that you operate in. So ask yourself this: what does freedom mean to you? I was reading some statistics yesterday about the amount of household debt in Australia, and the fact that 1/4 of the Australian population doesn't have more than $1,000 worth of savings in the bank. So when they got told a couple of weeks ago that they don't have a job, and they had to find out ways to pay their rent and their mortgages and their expensive lifestyle, their whole world started crashing down. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are hurting very badly today. And I feel so very sorry for you all. But there's an opportunity in this. There's an opportunity to sit down and say to yourself, how can I rebuild my life? How can I change my life so that I'll never be in this position again? And you don't have to become a homeless man. You don't have to start a charity organization and fly around the world doing stuff. You can do it all in your own backyard. And it starts with you and the decisions and the choices that you make. So I've arrived in this point in my life. What's going to happen with my podcast show and all this, I don't know, but it's opening up many opportunities because I put myself out of my comfort zone again. I knew nothing about podcasting 10 months ago. I started from ground zero, and my commitment to myself was to throw myself into this for a year, to see how I went, to work hard, to do the due diligence on everything that I'm doing, and then after that year, assess it to take it to the next level. I have a goal that I want to be one of the best travel podcasters in the world, and I'm going to make that happen with hard work and commitment to my passion, because I'm now living my authentic truth. And I can sit here and say that for the record because I've created a journey of freedom that allows me to get up every day and do what I love to do, and that's talking to people about their travel experiences around the world. It keeps me connected to the travel industry. It keeps me connected to the world that I've already seen a number of times. So when I talk to my guests about places that they've been to, there's a very high chance that I've been to that very street, that very restaurant, that very place that they've spoken about at some stage in my life. And it also makes me very excited about the opportunity that I have to take my podcast show on the road around the world, which I'm going to do at some stage. So all that is very exciting, and it's something that will enable me to keep myself out of my comfort zone and pushing my boundaries to become a better human being, but more importantly, become a happier human being by doing the things that I love. So my message today to you all is really use this amazing opportunity that we've been given. It doesn't matter where the coronavirus started from, why it started. The reality is that it's here. The reality is that you've been told to stay at home. The reality is that you have an opportunity now to plan the life that you truly want, the authentic life that you truly want to live for yourself. And if that's with the people that you're currently with, or if that's going to mean change in your life, then be honest with yourself. Because as many things happen, there's no need to be violent towards somebody you don't want to be with. The question is, if you're honest with yourself, then remove yourself from that situation. Be honest to yourself first, and then you can be honest with everybody else. So there you go. What I'd like to do is, as a result of sharing my own personal journey with you all today, is I'd like to offer the opportunity to anybody out there listening who would like to come on my show to bear your true authentic self. And we can do that either in a recorded situation, or we can just do it as a conversation piece. It's up to you. But I did want to offer the opportunity to everybody listening today. If you wanted to take the opportunity to use this time that you've been given to rethink about pressing the reset button in your life, then I'm happy to help in any small way that I can to make a better life for you as well. So there we go. The journey of Mark Philpott to freedom. Has it been easy? No, it hasn't been easy. Have I learnt a lot? Yes, I've learnt a lot. And one other thing that I'd like to add that's been very important as part of this journey is managing ego. And for anybody that works in the corporate world, you know how stronger egos there are that exist in that world. And in a lot of business, you don't just have to be in the corporate world. And I guess one of the things that I've been focusing on for many years now is to understanding the ego and what role it plays in the relationships that I have, in the environment that I'm working in, and the future that I'm creating for myself. And letting go of a lot of the negative ego is a very important thing. So again, relating it back to the situation we find ourselves in today, having a negative ego in the current environment is not going to serve you well moving forward. It's not going to attract the people that you need and want in your life, and it's not going to be a sustainable thing for a positive life. So be aware of that and try to be conscious of letting go of that negative ego and moving more into a place of a loving ego, where you're sending out that vibration to the universe rather than sending out a dark and negative ego vibration to the universe. It's not all about self in an egotistical way. It's about love in an egotistical way. That's what I believe anyway. Okay, folks, well, that's about all I've got to share for you today. I'm very happy to receive any feedback you want to give me. You can either contact me personally through all the channels that are available to do that. I'd like to thank you all very much for listening to my journey. I hope some of it resonates with you. I hope it gives you some food for thought. I'm open to share and discuss and have any one-on-one sessions with anybody who wants to get in contact with me. I'm also happy to have anybody on my show who wants to go through a similar process so others can learn and others can evolve as well, because that's what the intention of this is. It's to enable us all to evolve and grow into a positive, authentic mindset so we can live our true and best self. So thank you very much for listening, and I'd also once again like to send out a huge thank you to every guest that's been on my podcast show. You're all being greatly appreciated. I've learnt so much from you all, and I look forward to all the future guests that haven't appeared yet that you can all listen to in future episodes. If you do like the podcast show, please do me a favor and let other people know about it. You can find us at www.globaltravelchannel.com. Until then, I wish everyone a very happy Easter, a very safe time, and a very positive future to you all. Lots of love from Mark, and I'll speak to you again soon.